Crazy girlfriends. What's your side of the story?
What?
Years ago, I met a guy and felt an instant connection. For a while, he felt the same way, and things were really intense. But then, for some reason I couldn't understand, he started to ignore me. This all happened over 3 years. When he stopped paying attention to me, it made me really upset. I was so emotionally involved with him that just being near him made my body react. Everything felt right when I was with him. So when I realized it didn't feel the same way, I was confused and hurt. I was so hurt and angry, and not knowing why made me act strangely. I became obsessed with him. I never called him a lot or anything like that. Instead, I would try to be at places where I knew he would be, at the right time. When I heard from a friend about an ex-girlfriend of his, I got really jealous and worried. Was he seeing her again? Why? Why her and not me? What was wrong with me? I became obsessed with her too, and that's when things got weird. Started driving past both of their houses. If I saw his car at her house, I would drive around and around until he left. I would check when he was last online on Facebook, the feature is like a tool, and I would try to guess what they were doing based on how often he logged on. After a while, instead of driving by, I started wearing a disguise and walking past her house, but only when he was there. The pain I felt when I saw his car there was too much. I had to know what they were doing. Why her and not me? I started crawling in the bushes outside her house, wearing a disguise, trying to hear what they were talking about. I heard them doing stuff a few times. It was creepy, and I hate that I know that. My behavior got worse, and I did some other things I won't mention here. Finally, I started hanging around outside his house. One night, he came out and saw me in my disguise. He said my name and left, instead of getting angry or weirded out. After that, I stopped all my strange behavior, but I still wonder why I did it. I don't know myself. The worst part was that during all those lonely, sad nights, I knew I was acting crazy and weird, but I still did it. At the time, I was getting help for trying to hurt myself, but I kept acting strangely. I never told my therapists about him or her or what I was doing. I wish I could say I was really out of my mind and hearing voices, but I chose to do those things. I hated doing it, but I still did it, even though I seemed like a normal, well-educated person. It's been a few years now, and when I think about it, it feels like it was someone else doing those things. Why did I do that? Will I do it again? Why did I get so weird about him and no one else? I don't know. Well, certainly a good sign that she's aware of how crazy she acted. Some people would just think they're behaving appropriately and are not obsessed. Story 2. I was meeting his friends for the first time. We all went out together and then came back to his house for drinks. I was talking to his friends, trying to get to know them and be social. He was upstairs talking to another friend. A girl walked in and went upstairs, and I didn't think much of it until his friend came down and started trying to get me to go somewhere else. I realized they were trying to distract me. Since I'd been drinking, everything seemed like a bigger deal. I made a scene and went to knock on the locked door. I might have started screaming because what else was I supposed to do when the guy I'm seeing is in a locked room with another pretty girl? I was embarrassed. I couldn't be calmed down and felt alone because they were all his friends. I was screaming, crying, and making a fuss. So that's how I became known as the crazy one. Wow. His friends are terrible as well. We don't stand for that in my friend group. Cheat on your partner in front of us and you get canceled. Story 3. For me, I was with a guy for 4 years. The last 6 months of it, I had no idea he was cheating on me. I found out. I got upset and I asked him to come over to talk it over. Mind you, I was really rational about the situation. I felt sad, not only that he cheated on me, but that he must have felt trapped to do it in the first place. So I basically asked him why after all this time he couldn't just tell me that he wasn't interested in me anymore. He responded, "I just didn't want to hurt you." Well, that was not nice, but okay. A few days later, I check on my Facebook and I have all these messages from people that I'm not necessarily friends with. I just knew them because they were friends with my ex. All their messages weren't kind to me, and even people for some reason were making notes and passing them along like those chain letters or fill in the blanks. So basically, these notes were poorly edited or photoshopped. Might as well have been paint. Screenshots of convos where people twisted my words, making it look like I was the bad guy. Basically, I ignored these things. I was upset, but more embarrassed because honestly I found that my ex had been actually telling people these things were true. I asked him to kindly stop, but he kept insisting that he was stating facts. I kept telling him that those things weren't true. Soon after, he decided to come up with new things. Now he was telling people that I begged for money and made him buy everything because I'm selfish. People bought it. Although I was the one who had a job, he never worked, so I asked him again kindly not to say things like that and he should be over me and focus on his new relationship. Well, it didn't stop. I got messages from his girlfriend about mistreating him and begging him to stop with my lies, and she told me some other stuff. Finally, I had enough. After all the pestering, I ran into him at the mall where he greeted me with a smile and gestured to give me a hug like we're friends. I told him that's not appropriate and really, I just don't want to talk to him anymore. His girlfriend was meeting up with him and she stopped by as I was walking away from him and she started screaming at me in the middle of the mall. I kept trying to explain I had no intentions of meeting him there. All the while she's screaming, calling me crazy, he's recording it all. I finally start to walk away. Confrontation isn't my thing. She grabs me and keeps telling me to quit obsessing over her boyfriend. I struggle to get away, and finally a security guy shows up and she explains how I'm causing commotion. He kicks me out. Hours later, I go on Facebook and see I have 75 messages. I am tagged in something. Well, my ex recorded the whole thing where I did nothing and posted it on Facebook. People called me all kinds of names, so I don't use Facebook anymore. So much drama. All the time I was the crazy ex-girlfriend, and honestly, I was more heartbroken that he was sad being with me than the actual breakup. I wanted to file a police report. Never did. Eventually got caught doing a crime. I've been called to court, never showed, and fled to Canada. Story 4. Former crazy girlfriend here. Accused my boyfriend in high school of having an affair with his best friend who was a girl. It made me uncomfortable when they were alone together, when he would constantly talk about her. For instance, he told her how beautiful she was at prom and never commented on my dress. His guy friend, who's still a close friend of mine to this day, ended up pretty much being my date while he hung out with this girl. A lot of his guy friends told me I was just jealous and irrational. I broke up with him feeling like the crazy girlfriend. Fast forward 4 years and me and my guy friend were talking and he said that this ex-boyfriend of mine almost had a restraining order from his former best friend who was a girl. Turns out he was in love with her for years and she led him on big time. Would tease him and use him as a tool to make herself feel better when she needed a confidence boost. Pretty much. He ended up constantly badgering her about how much he loved her to the point of getting hammered and showing up at her house, looking at her Facebook, etc. She had to completely remove him from her life because it was freaking her out. Turns out he was a crazy one, and he was cheating on me. Now if I get that feeling, I just end the relationship right then and there. Not dealing with that again. I don't understand why people that are clearly really into other people want to date in the first place. If you're dating, you should not be constantly comparing them to someone you have a huge crush on and or your exes. Story 5. I was young and naive. I was head over heels in love with a guy. And in my mind, letting it go wasn't an option. In my dumb brain, I thought somehow that if I talked and bugged him enough, that I would somehow figure out the way to fix it. This included a night of me showing up at his door and crying for 2 hours, asking him why. To be fair, he did lead me on for a while, telling me we would be together after he got through his whole I want to be alone period. Obviously, that didn't happen. It definitely made me grow up a lot. I realize now, especially that when a man decides he's done with a relationship, it's definitely done. So yeah. Basically, I was just a crazy idealistic girl who thought if I asked enough questions, I would get an answer I would want to hear. Story 6. My ex-boyfriend spent years making me believe that I didn't need a backup plan. We were going to move in together and get married. I didn't have any other plans. He did this by having serious talks with me and also by complaining nonstop until I gave in. He criticized me because he didn't like my friends, and he accidentally went through my emails, Facebook, and phone at least twice each time. He used what he found to tell me what a terrible girlfriend I was. It turned out he was having an affair with a girl who lived down the hall, the same girl he helped get a job at his company. She was the girl he threw a double birthday party for, the one he invited to our dinners, and the one he had lunch with once a week. So while he was telling me to spend less time with my friends, to love and depend only on him, and calling me a bad girlfriend, he was cheating on me. For years. He messed up my life and sent me back years. Money I could have saved, time I could have spent with other people or in school or work. He knew he was ruining my future and didn't care. So I texted his mom and dad, and I called his workplace to tell them he was having an affair with a coworker. It doesn't seem like he lost his job, which is too bad. I would have liked him to start all over from the beginning, too. Our mutual friends wanted to stay neutral. Our response was that we don't have friends in common. I know they've all told everyone I'm a crazy, spiteful woman. The truth is, yes, I am. 100%. Story 7. I wasn't the crazy girlfriend. I was the crazy wife. He became convinced I was cheating on him and that I was crazy. I didn't want to tell him the passwords to my computer or emails. I bought a new phone after my old one died. He told me to input a PIN, so I did. I was in the middle of exams at the time, so I was spending a lot more time at college, with classmates who didn't necessarily know. At the same time, I was being called into work a lot, so I was rarely home. Clearly, this all meant something was going on. I left my computer on one night, and he took the chance. I'm not too sure what he saw. A Facebook conversation with a friend from class. But he became convinced I was having an affair. It didn't matter that I literally didn't have the time to have one, nor the energy, but he became furious. He demanded access to everything and started following me around the house, calling me a bunch of names so I'd show him my emails and FB convos and internet history. I was so sick and stressed that I caved and said, I suppose I had. I mean, I talked to guys he didn't know. Maybe I was cheating? He told me I was sick. That's what really sticks out, looking back. At some point, I left the house that night and made it to a friend's place. I have no memory of the drive from mine to hers. I was in a daze. Everything he said kept repeating in my head, and I checked myself into a health clinic. I was discharged a couple of weeks later with a diagnosis. He clung to that diagnosis like a life raft. I went back to him because I didn't know what else to do. My father didn't want me to come home because he thought he and I just needed to work some things out. I had no idea how to tell him the truth. At that stage, I didn't know what the truth was. So we went to couples therapy. He accused me of a variety of different things, lying and cheating mostly. I learned that if I didn't tell him 100% of everything all the time, it was a lie. It got to the point where I had to tell him every single thing I did during the day, who I talked to, where I went, what I did. At times it wasn't enough. It had to be more. I began embellishing the truth because it wasn't enough. The truth wasn't, well, truthy enough. All the time he told me I was sick, made it sound like I was disgusting. About 8 months after I was discharged from the hospital, I was told I no longer met the criteria for my diagnosis and hadn't for quite some time. I went home and told him. I was so happy. I was certifiably sane. The first thing he said to me was, "So what are you?" He needed me to be sick. If I wasn't sick, then the problems we had were equally shared. He had to take some responsibility and accountability in the relationship. I constantly tried to meet him in the middle, but it wasn't enough. It was black or white, all or nothing. We went back to couples therapy. In our last session, the therapist clearly sided with me. She said as such. She said I was in the right and that he needed to stop complaining and realize I was trying to meet him halfway, and he had to do the same. He said he'd had enough. Our marriage was done. He went to stay with his brother and sister-in-law. I had 2 days to get out of the house. Although I was in a daze that night, I quickly packed up, and within a day, I was gone. This was 12 months ago. Still have people coming up to me and asking if I was the one to call an end to it. He's apparently been crying to friends, playing the pity card. He tells everyone I cheated on him with dozens of men, when in actuality, he's the only man I've ever slept with. He tells them I'm crazy. I've lost some friends, but I've also discovered who my true friends are. He contacted me about 3 months after he left and said he wants a letter from my psychiatrist while I was in the hospital to state I'm fit for court. I reluctantly called my psych and he laughed, saying there's no reason for him to write anything. There's nothing wrong with me. I've moved on. I'm with someone else now. I will admit I'm anxious a lot and constantly watch myself. I never know where the line is. I'm always looking over my shoulder, minding my words so I don't say something wrong. I'm scared of making waves and upsetting someone. I've moved on, but I still have a long way to go, I suppose. Story 8. Crazy Ex here. I went to study abroad for a full year, and before I left, he started to ignore me and tell me to quit whenever I was exposing my opinion, even in front of friends and family. After that, he would just not answer my texts or tell me I was writing to get attention and ruin his day. I just moved to another country. I reached my limit when he ignored me for a full week. We broke up and I decided to remove all contact for a few days. When I unblocked him to try to become friends, he suddenly saw what he had been doing wrong and I decided to give him a second chance. As soon as I told him that a guy at my university had tried to flirt with me, he said I was obviously looking for a new man. And I had all this planned. This routine kept going until he explicitly called me names in a text. I blocked him everywhere and ignored his texts and calls for 2 weeks. He told me I was doing a ghosting thing. I made out with another guy at the time, and after he found out, he sent me a message to tell me that he was going to ruin my social life in my city for cheating on him. Soon after he told me he was going to leave me alone because he had a new girlfriend, I sent him a message asking if he was kidding. He called me a crazy girl. So for his friends, I am a cheater because I cheated on him and had a new boyfriend. I'm crazy because I was pestering him for weeks in order to get back together and being extremely jealous of his new girlfriends. All of this, of course, according to him. The last thing I knew is that he's a good guy and I was the bad guy who made him act like that because I must have a problem. Story 9. During the beginning of my relationship with my current boyfriend, a mutual friend of ours got weirdly competitive with him and dropped hints that he had been with me. Never happened. In fact, I wasn't even attracted to him. Because we were all friends, I had talked to this friend about my relationship with my boyfriend and I likely overshared, but he used that information to make my boyfriend paranoid and insinuate all sorts of things that never happened. My boyfriend, who had been cheated on by his previous girlfriend and who was generally a cynical guy, read into all of these hints and believed him, but didn't bring up his suspicions for about another month or so. at which point he totally blindsided me with an accusation out of nowhere. He had me endlessly repeat encounters or conversations with this friend, and did so many different times over several months, and expected me to remember conversations that I never knew would be significant in the first place. My boyfriend would freak out if I didn't respond to a text or call on time. If I stayed late at work or class, he would stop talking to me for 3 days at a time with no explanation because something bothered him. I started to go a bit mad and to question my reality. My friend stopped wanting much to do with either of us because I was completely distraught almost all the time, but trying so hard to keep us together because I loved him. I would always be on the verge of tears, fidgety, and paranoid about anything that I did or said being used against me. The whole campus seemed to know that our relationship was not normal, and while most people believed me, doubt was raised in their minds about both of us. It's nearly impossible to prove that something hasn't occurred, so I didn't have any way out. After recounting my interactions with his friend to him again one day, he claimed he believed me. We were more or less okay for 3 or 4 months. Then out of nowhere again, he accuses me and tells me he didn't actually believe me, but was just trying to. My trust in him was now shattered, as much as his trust in me. This continued to happen for about 1.5 years, before eventually I managed to set the record straight by calling this mutual friend, while my boyfriend sat and listened silently to our call. And he mentioned that my boyfriend thought I had cheated with him, and he claimed not to know where that thought came from, even though I know he was intentionally trying to insinuate that. Finally, my boyfriend accepted the truth, but it took another 6 months to a year before I was able to trust that I wouldn't be falsely accused again. Our relationship is great now, but we lost a ton of friends in the drama, and my family will likely never fully accept him because of how he treated me. Just hope nobody jokes around her boyfriend that the phone call was pre-planned, because that will start her back at step 1. Anyways, if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 10. I was never officially his girlfriend, but I was dating a guy I worked with. Another girl from work started saying he was her boyfriend. I asked him if he was seeing both of us, since we weren't exclusive and it wasn't crazy to think he might be, but he got really upset and defensive. He said they were definitely not involved and that she was the one who was crazy. I believed him. Then, when I quit my job, he invited her to my going-away party, when she was talking about their 2-year relationship. I confronted him about it, and he told me I was crazy and making everything up. He said I made up our dates, going to his house, and all the intimate stuff we did. He told me he was never attracted to me and that I was crazy and should stay away from him. He only told me this, not his girlfriend of 2 years who never found out. After that, I needed therapy for a while because I started to wonder, what if I just made it all up somehow? But I definitely didn't, or at least that's what my therapist said. He told me I had a very pragmatic view in life and a firm grasp on healthy coping mechanisms. Plus, at least 2 coworkers knew he was cheating on her with me, so it couldn't have all been in our imaginations. Story 11. I didn't know I had anxiety until recently. He was my first boyfriend and everything was okay at the beginning, but then I got really jealous and worried about his female friends, even those I used to be friends with. They like to joke around and say things that are a bit wild, which I thought was flirting, and things got worse from there. Some of those friends started avoiding him because they felt they couldn't enjoy their friendship with him when I was around, so my ex felt like I was taking his friends away. He wanted me to change, so I tried to relax and think positive, but I couldn't. I read books about relationships, but a lot of the advice was about changing how I think, so that didn't work either. I went to therapy, but it was just general talking and only lasted a few sessions because I had to move. I was really struggling, wanting to change but messing up every time. From his point of view, I was being difficult on purpose and not trying hard enough to change. He said I was sweet, kind, and loving, but the jealousy made me hard to love. That was the only thing he didn't like about me. I wouldn't have known it was anxiety until a friend with some knowledge of psychology listened to me and suggested I see a therapist who specializes in anxiety. I did, and more than one therapist said I definitely had anxiety. I decided to get cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, but by the time I got my diagnosis, my ex didn't care anymore and wouldn't talk to me. He was tired of it all, especially since he was mad at me about something else. He broke up with me a few days later, saying I was just making excuses and that I wouldn't change. Part of me wishes he could have stayed, but another part knows he put up with me longer than he should have. That was just a few months ago and it still hurts. I wish he would come back, but I'm trying not to hope too much. He made sure we couldn't talk by blocking me everywhere. I wasn't telling him about the anxiety to make excuses, but to explain why I was the way I was. I wanted to say I was sorry and that now I knew what was wrong, I could work on getting better, and that would be my way of apologizing. Sadly, I don't think he believes me. I wish he would think about this. If I was making it up, why would I spend money on therapy when it's really expensive? He knows I'm not rich enough to waste money like that. Some of our mutual friends have taken his side and said hurtful things, like how other people with my illness don't act as badly as I did. One of them, who knows nothing about psychology, even doubted my diagnosis and suggested I might have a personality disorder like BPD. And just after he broke up with me, he invited a bunch of women and some of their friends who didn't even know me to lunch just to talk badly about me and make fun of me. And they still do sometimes. I still miss him though. And I just think he was really angry when he did those things after we broke up. I wish we hadn't ended so badly, but CBT has been really helpful. I hope I'm not getting my hopes up for nothing, but it feels like this could really help me change. Still learning a lot about anxiety and how to deal with my thoughts, but my therapist helped me understand generalized anxiety disorder, or JD, as something where your brain can turn off and is always on alert, like a security system that's broken. I learned that anxiety can make negative emotions stronger, so while the jealousy might have been real, my behavior went too far. I also looked back at my life and I realized that some other things that happened might also be connected to anxiety, and how growing up with parents who were too worried and protective probably led to my GAD. After the shock of realizing I've had anxiety for a long time, I apologized to some friends for old arguments and told them about my diagnosis. They told me to stop apologizing for things that happened a long time ago, and have been very supportive. I'm glad to have people who don't think I'm crazy and still want me in their lives. But I wish my ex was one of those people. Still miss him a lot. Story 12. Not many people know this, but I was married once. My ex-husband was a real pain and I was naive. We had only been dating for 6 weeks when I got pregnant. I'd like to say it was because it broke, but it was really because he told me he had never met anyone like me before. He said he was so in love that he wanted to marry me and start a family right away. I came from a really messed up home, so I was happy that someone wanted to love me forever. After I was pregnant, he told me I didn't need to work anymore. A couple of months later, we were too poor to stay in our neighborhood, so he moved us to a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. He stopped insuring his truck and started using my car to go to work. If I had an appointment, he would take time off work and drive me. But if I wanted to see friends or family, the answer was always no. Things got really bad after my son was born. He didn't show up for the birth, and when my son was born at 8 p.m., he went home to get a change of clothes and didn't come back for 2 days. I got postpartum, which was really anxiety that would hit me 45 minutes before he was supposed to come home from work every day. He became angry and wouldn't give me any privacy. He'd set up a camera to watch me at home in the living room, saying it was for the baby. He somehow saw every text message, website I visited, and photo I took on my phone. I don't know how he did it. If I wanted to shower, he would wait until I closed the shower door and then unlock the bathroom door. He would tell me to hurry up because our son was crying. This made me more anxious, so I decided to do something. I got a prescription for Cipralex and Ativan. Since he controlled the money and gave me a sort of allowance when he gave me money for the prescription, I took the medicine but didn't fill the Ativan prescription. I kept the money instead. I saved enough to take a cab to the bus stop and then a bus to the nearest courthouse. I asked the lawyer what I could do, and she said there was nothing I could do if I was still living in the same house. No custody, nothing. I would have to find a way to support myself. He found out I had gone to the courthouse because he noticed I wasn't on the baby cams. Then he checked my internet history and saw I had visited the courthouse website for custody information. I didn't know he was tracking my internet use. I admitted I wanted to leave and planned to take my son. He tried to leave me out of our house, and when I tried to hurt him, he called the police and said I mistreated him. The police saw his nail marks and said they couldn't tell who started it, especially since I just cried when they tried to talk to me. He called Child Protective Services and they said I could only see my son with someone else there and that I had to find a new place to live. I could only see my son after a full psychiatric assessment. I just wanted to leave, and the marriage was so bad that I was always anxious. So everyone was told by him that I was crazy and lost custody of my newborn. 6 weeks later, the psychiatric evaluation was done, showing I never failed the prescription and had never taken Ativan. He wanted custody of our child, so he lied about my health, turning my anxiety from not liking him into me being completely psychotic. People still think I'm not stable, but it never happened. I now have custody of my son because his lies were proven false in court. If I had failed that Ativan prescription, I would never have seen my son again. So I'm not crazy, and he now has 3 children with 3 different mothers. Story 13. I dated this guy for 2.5 months. He moves in about 2 weeks into us dating. Apparently, his family treated him so badly, so me, being a nice person, after consulting my mom, offered him to move in. First month is all good. It's great having him there. But then he changes. He started disrespecting my brother and mom and basically pestered me for dropping out of school. Anytime someone asked something, I'd go to answer and he'd say, "I'll answer. I finished school." The thing that really pushed me over the edge and made me dump him was when he started mistreating my cats. My mom's friend's cat was just injured and it cost him nearly $1,000. We couldn't afford that if our cats had an injury, so I spoke to him and asked him to tone down his aggressiveness. He did, but only for a day or two. So I broke up with him over Facebook as he was at his mom's house, who went off and accused me of dating him as a rebound and that I pitied him. He went and complained to anyone and everyone that would listen and say that I was a crazy girl that treated him horribly and that I was clingy. I was sick at the time, so I wanted cuddles. He moves out but forgets a few things and comes to pick them up the next day. He sent me a list of what he forgot and said that if any of that stuff is in any way damaged, he was going to do something. Gave his stuff back and blocked him. 2 months later, I unblock him, thinking he'll be over me and stop being mean. Nope. He sends me a message saying how much he misses me and wants me back and says he's sorry for how he acted. I told him he acted mean and he went crazy. Oh, but I'm the crazy, clingy one. All his friends believe him, of course. All my friends believed me when they showed them the screenshots. Next he had after me, she messaged me and we talked. Apparently he said mean things about me to her. She ended up saying that I'm actually a really nice person, but now I actually have fears of seeing him. Been to the police and they couldn't do anything. Can't wait to move states so I can stop living in fear. Story 14. I was dating and later engaged to a man who was a liar. He would lie about what he had for lunch that day. It just came naturally to him. Apparently, so did cheating. He did that multiple times. We had many mutual friends, and I'm not the type to go to other people about my problems in relationships. I never told anyone about the times I caught him cheating or the literally hundreds of lies I caught him in constantly. This resulted in me looking stone cold most of the time, since he would go to our mutual friends saying I yelled at him and called him names. Yes, because I found out that he cheated on me yet again, for no reason. People started talking about the horrible way I treated him, how wonderful he was for putting up with me, how controlling and jealous I was, etc. After we broke up, I lost all of our mutual friends. He started dating a girl that he'd been cheating on me with. Of course, our friends didn't know that, and our friends welcomed her with open arms. The girlfriend herself even thought I was crazy, since she apparently had no idea that her boyfriend had a fiancé for the first 2 months of their relationship. The girlfriend and our old mutual friends would even post little passive-aggressive things online every now and then. I'm so glad we get to spend this Christmas together, my love. I remember how you described last Christmas. Hopefully this one was at least a little better, lol. And the like. To this day, the girlfriend, who is now his wife, has no idea. Our old mutual friends who all dumped me like a wet blanket have no idea. I'm just the crazy psycho ex-girlfriend who treated her boyfriend horribly, had major jealousy issues, was controlling, and who, thank God, is no longer in any of their lives. They all deserve each other. Story 15. I met my ex through a friend. Mind you, this was my first boyfriend ever, and I was just naive, as he stated. We spent the whole summer being around each other for days, weeks, months, and he was my first for everything. The end of the summer, the very last day, I overheard him talking to his friends and my brothers. I don't even like her. Just trying to make her happy, you know? She's probably going to give it to me anyway. Funny how I remember exactly what he said. Anyway, I broke down crying that day. The next day, I just tried to confront him about it, and I couldn't do that without crying the whole time. He just called me crazy and said he only did this to get what he wanted. Still, I'm reminded of him every single day. Story 16. He left to go to a party in another country for 6 months, saying it was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. He's rich and travels a lot. He did this after I had been an emergency, even though he told me he wouldn't go because I was more important. But then he secretly made all the travel plans and lied to me about it. I broke up with him after the 5th missed or very late Skype call. He picked the times. We still talked sometimes after a month or two. He told me how much he missed me and how excited he was to see me again, hinting that he wanted to get back together without saying it directly. When he came back, I tried to get back together with him. He was my first love. We learned a lot from those experiences. But he said he wanted to stay single for now, even though he kept saying we would definitely get back together, just not yet. I didn't want a girlfriend at that moment, and he said this for a whole year. He lied about starting to date another girl. He kept telling me not to date other people because it would upset him. He led me on until I found out the truth and got upset. He didn't think it was a big deal. I stopped hanging out with our mutual friends, who he lived with. They thought I was being silly. And one of his friends mistreated me. When I told him, he decided I was lying. He and all his friends tried to make me believe I'd made it up, even though the friend admitted he had done it to other people too. So now they call me the crazy ex. In reality, I could have probably handled everything better, but I just had an emergency that ended my sports career, dealing with a significant loss in the family. My heart was being broken over and over by my first love, who told me many times he wanted to marry me. Story 17. Dated a guy for about a month. A coworker. Oops. I thought we had a pleasant few weeks, so I genuinely have no idea what happened when he got all weird and dumped me one day at work. His only reason was that he is the most indecisive person. I guess he didn't want to be in a relationship. I didn't really get a clear answer. A week later, he got a new girlfriend. I was devastated. When he made the relationship public, I commented on it with, "Congrats, don't forget to hit it and quit it." He blocked me. Several of his friends called me crazy, and he sent me text messages about me being a nightmare, driving him crazy, all kinds of stuff. Unfriended, blocked, cold silence at work from there on out. A few months later, he was unemployed and I got a job somewhere else. He hit me up on Facebook one day, asking if I knew anyone still at our old job and if I could put in a good word for him. Was I really crazy? Story 18. I'm the crazy ex-wife. During our 10-year relationship, married for 6, he was chronically unemployed. He'd work for a few months and then get fired for being late. He had a habit of staying up until 3 or 4 a.m. playing video games and then oversleeping. He'd get warned at work for his tardiness, and I wouldn't leave the house until I saw him wake up, but he'd go back to bed after I left. But he'd always get fired, and it was never his fault. Someone was out to get him. He did take some classes and eventually got a master's, which I paid for. I paid for everything since he was awful with money. I'd go to pay rent from our joint account, and the check would bounce because he had to buy some new video game. During the divorce, I discovered he had several maxed-out credit cards and had tried to open more in my name. Luckily, I had an idea he was up to something and put a fraud alert on my SSN. I was working full-time this entire time, and for several years had 2 jobs, part-time evenings and weekends. He did nothing around the house. I'd get home after work, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at one job, then 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., and there would still be dishes in the sink, laundry piled up, trash all over the floor. I'd ask for help. He'd be good around the house for a couple weeks, and then he'd slide back into laziness. We went to marriage counseling, and he twisted everything I said. I'd answer the therapist, and then he'd translate. I really meant something else. He talks over the therapist and translates for her as well. I realize now we should have found another therapist, but at the time, I didn't know any better. After years of our marriage being awful, he must have sensed I was getting ready to leave him, so he started asking me to have a kid. I was his meal ticket. He didn't want me going anywhere. That's when I began to panic. He couldn't remember to feed the cats, and yet he felt he was ready to be a father. I started confiding in a friend from work. We developed feelings for each other, and he helped me get up the courage to leave. Well, before I could actually leave, my ex found out what I was planning, and it was all my fault. I drove him to it. After I left, he called my parents, my friends, my family, telling them I was a lying, cheating woman, that he was blindsided. He called one of my cousins so much that she threatened him with a restraining order. I did eventually get free. However, he told everyone and anyone that I ruined her perfect marriage. I cheated on him, and that I was an awful, unsupportive wife. I was the reason he had so much debt, and I spent all our money. I said nothing to defend myself from all his accusations. Story 19. I guess I'm crazy for looking in my now ex-boyfriend's phone. But in my opinion, if there's something to find, then I wasn't crazy. My hunch was just really good at telling me something wasn't right. Plus, some things that had gone down in the relationship led me to believe something fishy was going on. So it's not like I looked under a context where I had no reason to think something was going on or that he was lying to me. When I looked in his phone, I found out he was lying about some major stuff that he knew would hurt me. It broke my heart because I never wanted to be that girl who would snoop on her boyfriend. But I've always had a pretty good instinct, and if I hadn't looked, he would still be lying to me to this day, and I would be none the wiser. So I guess I don't identify myself as the crazy ex, but I know some people who would think that I am. But I don't think those people have really ever had to experience the feeling of not knowing whether or not the person you love was being deceitful. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.